Greetings. Hello everybody, Polish Mojo here. Now, I know you're asking, Polish Mojo, what the f*** is on your screen? Well, it's a video I'm about to fact check. And the argument is stupid and should be debunked. And it's already been debunked. So why am I making a video about this? Well, for clout. And the argument that I'm about to debunk is why the Confederate flag is not racist. In this video explained by Noah Terabek here, I'm going to fact check it, fact check what the f*** he says, and basically just correct what the f*** he's actually saying. Like, you're not going to see my face until the end of the video where I'm going to thank everyone for watching, but you're just going to hear me rant all along. So it's really better that you listen to what I say and take what he says with a grain of salt. So yeah, let's get into it, bro. Let's get into it. Damn good cup of coffee. Also, just a heads up, we're explaining a heavy topic, so please do not harass anyone in the video, especially Noah. I respect him, but not his politics and his opinion. But also, I'm going to have to explain this from a neutral viewpoint. So, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. But if you're going to be offended by the video, please leave the video anyways. Let's get back to the video.
Hey guys, it's Noah Terabek, and welcome back to the channel where we take a deep dive into some of the most controversial and complicated topics in history. Today, we're tackling a huge one, and I do mean huge. We're going to explore the rebel flag, or also known as the Confederate battle flag. Specifically, this video called Why the Confederate Flag is Not Racist by the YouTuber Southern Gentleman. Now, before we go any further, I want to make something clear. This is for educational purposes only, and we're going to try to approach this subject with a nuance and context it deserves.
Okay, so the true reason why the Confederacy seceded was to protect and expand the institution of slavery, as well as maintain white supremacy. It's been proven by the official declarations of causes written by the seceding states themselves, which explicitly cite the preservation of slavery as their primary motivation. Like, South Carolina seceded before Lincoln was even inaugurated, and they thought he was going to outlaw slavery entirely. Lincoln did not want to outlaw slavery. He wanted compensated emancipation. But after that didn't work out, they decided to secede because more slaves! Etc.
History, after all, is rarely black and white. Pun intended. But
well, that joke was shitty. No offense.
Yeah, today we're going to dive into a lot of historical tidbits. So grab your notebooks, folks, because this is going to be a wild ride. Let's get into it. Why are we talking about the Confederate flag? Well, it's one of those symbols that got a lot of baggage.
You're not wrong about that one. It does have a lot of baggage.
Whether you see it as a symbol of Southern pride, sign of racial oppression, or something else entirely, there's a lot of debate surrounding it. And in this video from Southern Gentleman, the claim is made that the Confederate flag, and by extension, the Confederacy itself, was not inherently racist.
Yes, it is. See the main reason why the Confederacy seceded.
Now, before we start throwing around terms like historical revisionism or alternative history, let's take a look at the video's main argument. Southern Gentleman argues that a Confederate flag and a Confederacy were not exclusively about supporting slavery or racism, and that there were actually many non-white people who fought for the Confederacy. Sounds interesting, right? Let's dig in. Alright, let's start with some of the key points from Southern Gentleman's video. The first major claim that they make is that there were a surprising number of non-white people who fought for the Confederacy. And they list off a bunch of different ethnic groups who supposedly were involved. Now, I'm not saying we can just ignore this. It's true that there were people of all different backgrounds. fought for the South, including black, Jewish.
Just because there were non-white soldiers in the Confederate Army doesn't automatically disprove the point that the Confederacy seceded to defend, preserve, and expand the institution of the enslavement of African Americans. The Nazis had foreign soldiers of their own, including Ukrainians, Russians, Africans, Danish, Bosniaks, and Indians, and also had soldiers of French and even Jewish backgrounds, but they were mostly assimilated into the Nazi army. The Nazis had Jews in their army. That was true, but that doesn't mean the Nazis were good people. They killed 12 million people in the Holocaust, which included Jews, homosexuals, prisoners of war, the Romani, the disabled, Jehovah's Witnesses, and many more.
Irish, and even Chinese soldiers.
Yes, it is true that an estimated 50 to 330 Chinese individuals fought in the Civil War across both sides. Of those documented, the overwhelming majority, about 100 to 230, fought for the Union, while only a small handful, roughly 5, supported the Confederacy.
Let's break this down, shall we? 10,000 black Confederates. Wait, what? Did I hear that right? 10,000? Well, according to some sources, there were indeed black soldiers in the Confederate Army.
Even if you were to find evidence that black people were soldiers in the Confederate Army, that still wouldn't change the fact that the Confederacy seceded to defend, preserve, and expand the institution of slavery. The Confederate Army themselves confirmed that there weren't any black Confederate soldiers. Although there were camp slaves, there still weren't any black Confederate soldiers. Their white brethren would have made that extremely clear.
And most of these men were actually used as laborers rather than combatants. Others point to the fact that some were armed and participated in combat. But
although there weren't any organized black Confederate regiments in the Civil War, some camp slaves were loyal and did shoot at Yankees, but many were feigning their affections and waiting for the perfect time to get the out of there before anyone noticed, because camp slaves ran away all the time.
2,500 Hispanic Confederates. Yeah, this one makes sense. The South did have a fair number of Hispanic soldiers, particularly from areas like Texas and Florida, which had strong Spanish colonial influences.
That's honestly true. At least you didn't sugarcoat it with neo-Confederate talking points. That's a very good job. Although the number varies, there were approximately 3,500 to 10,000 Hispanics that fought for the Confederates as well, with some coming from Texas, Florida, and some states you forgot to mention, Alabama, and Louisiana. Louisiana formed multiple Hispanic and Creole regiments, including the Louisiana Tigers and the Cazadores Españoles. Forgive my pronunciation if I actually was bad at that. However, in the Union, they also had 10,000 Hispanics with many volunteers and draftees enlisting from urban centers like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and significant numbers also enlisted from the American Southwest and California, with hundreds of Spanish, Cuban, and Puerto Rico Americans serving in Company D of the 39th New York Infantry, also known as the Garibaldi Guard.
Still, they were a relatively small part of the overall army. 3,000 Jewish Confederates. Now, this is interesting. There were indeed some Jewish soldiers in the Confederate Army. One of the most notable was Judah Benjamin, a high-ranking Confederate official. But the idea that Jewish people en masse supported the Confederacy is another claim that needs more nuance.
Yes, they did. Approximately 1,200 to 3,000 Jewish men overwhelmingly fought for the Confederacy. Southern Jews felt largely accepted in the South and viewed their defense of the Confederacy as a duty to the region that adopted them. However, anti-Semitism was perceived as less intense in the North compared to the South, with discriminatory actions like Union General Ulysses S. Grant's General Order No. 11, which temporarily expelled Jews from certain military districts, caused outrage.
The majority of Jewish people in the South, in fact, opposed slavery.
Not even close, my guy.
20,000 Irish Confederates. This one's easier to believe. The Irish had a significant presence in the South, particularly in Louisiana and New Orleans. Many of them fought for the Confederacy, though this was likely more about loyalty to their local communities than an endorsement of slavery.
I don't need to fact check this because I already know it's true, but there wasn't a Irish brigade like in Gods in General.
Charles Chon, the Chinese Confederate. Ooh, this is a fascinating one. According to the video, Charles Chon was only a Chinese soldier in the Confederate Army. I mean, it's impossible to believe, but it's certainly a rare piece of history.
Yes, Charles Chan is a Chinese-born immigrant who lived in Texas, and on February 1st, 1862, at the age of 20 years old, he enlisted as a private in Company K of the 24th Texas Cavalry, which was later dismounted to serve as infantry. He was captured by Union forces at the Battle of Arkansas Post on January 11th, 1863, and sent to Camp Butler, a prison camp in Illinois. He was later released in a prisoner exchange, returned to the South, and re-enlisted in February 1864. Chan was killed in action in November 30th, 1864, during the Battle of Franklin in Tennessee. He's currently buried in the McGavock Confederate Cemetery in Franklin, Tennessee.
So yeah, there's truth in some of this, but here's the thing. The presence of non-white soldiers in the Confederate Army doesn't necessarily prove that the Confederacy was free from racism or that the Confederate flag wasn't tied to racism. What this argument seems to be overlooking is the context of these soldiers. Many of them were enslaved people or poor immigrants who had little choice but to join the army, or were coerced or drafted into service. This wasn't a free will situation for many of them, especially for black soldiers. The idea that these groups fought for sovereign pride is at best complicated. Many of them fought because they had to, not because they believed in the cause. And don't forget about the fact that the Confederacy was still built on the institution of slavery. Even if some individuals of various ethnic backgrounds fought in the army, it doesn't change the fact that the Confederacy's leadership, the political elite, and the majority of the army were fighting to preserve slavery as an institution.
And yet you still hold a biased opinion that the Confederate flag was not racist. How f***ing hypocritical.
The video also brings up Nathan Bedford Forrest, the famous Confederate general who, according to some sources, later became an advocate for civil rights. Shut
your mouth! No problem, John. Shut the up, you.
What kind of statement was that, Noah? Advocate for civil rights? He was the opposite of a civil rights activist. He was a slave trader who later became a Confederate cavalry officer that killed a bunch of surrendered black Union soldiers. And the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. How f***ing retarded and ignorant do you have to be to make the assumption that Nathan Bedford Forrest is a civil rights activist? I know I'm supposed to be respectful, but that statement was so f***ing ass, I couldn't stay silent. That's like calling Osama bin Laden a humanitarian.
And while Forrest did have a complicated post-war relationship with the Klan, he eventually renounced them. It doesn't exactly undo his role in perpetuating a racist system during the war. Plus, this kind of redemption arc for historical figures is always super tricky.
Imagine being a black person in Reconstruction-era southern U.S. You're barred from voting for the Republican Party. Your friend has been lynched by the Klan for telling people to vote Republican instead of Democrat. You narrowly escape your house for your own life while they burn it down, and you live long enough for 5 years of that just for you to watch this piece of fucking human trash give his Colleen Ballinger type apology.
All aboard the toxic gossip train. You're chugging down the tracks of misinformation.
Just because someone changed later in life doesn't mean we can ignore their earlier actions. Also, let's not forget that the Confederacy wasn't just fighting to maintain a way of life. It was fighting to maintain slavery, a brutal institution that disproportionately affected black people. And after the war, there was a long history of black disenfranchisement, Jim Crow laws, and systemic racism that carried on long after the Confederate Army was disbanded. The video even pulls out a quote from Robert E. Lee, who says, "While we see the course of the final abolition of human slavery is onward, we give it the aid of our prayers."
If Robert E. Lee supported abolition, then why did he own 200 slaves and became the general-in-chief of the very same army, of the very same breakaway nation that explicitly and very clearly seceded and fought against it?
Now, I'm not going to pretend if I'm an expert on Lee's personal beliefs, but this quote often used to argue that Lee wasn't pro-slavery, rather reluctantly fighting for a cause that he thought was lost. It's true that Lee later expressed personal regret about slavery, but let's be real, he didn't exactly go out of his way to oppose it during the war. This is one of those situations where Lee's personal views are often misused or oversimplified to support a narrative that may or may not reflect the full complexity of the situation. So, is the Confederate flag inherently racist?
Yes.
Well, that's a tough question, and several gentlemen make some points worth considering. But I think we need to understand the larger context. Even if there were diverse groups in the Confederacy, the core reason for its existence was to protect the institution of slavery.
In conclusion, the Confederate flag is a racist symbol. Now, before you end the video off, I want to say for the record that I do own a few Confederate flags myself, mostly as souvenirs. The only acceptable thing that I think the Confederate flag should be waved at would be at reenactments, historical displays, museums, and most specifically, in your own home. We should learn our history so we are not doomed to repeat it. And I used to believe that the Confederacy was all about states' rights. But then again, I learned otherwise, that it wasn't. It was for slavery. It was for the wrong reasons. And I hope you understand my perspective and you'll understand my time. You'll understand why I fact-checked a video to get this narrative to you. The Confederacy had formed and seceded to defend, protect, and even expand an ugly mark on our world, which is slavery, white supremacy, and hate. Anyways, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you guys liked the video, and I hope you guys learned something. I won't be censoring the comments like Noah Terabic, but I will keep the comments as it is, because I protect free speech, unlike what he says. So anyways, call me racist, call me a butthurt Yankee soy boy, I don't care. Send me threats, as I know. They don't hurt me. Anyways, hope you guys have a good day today, and alright, see ya.